Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell.
The old boat stood dead weight in the garage, and Lisa sat pensively in the front, in the small wooden triangle at the bow. This boat had been made by Dad himself when he was still young, a long, long time ago. He used to take meticulous care of it, painting it every spring with new varnish, touching up and fixing things. Lisa used to come here to visit the boat when she was homesick for her father. As a child, she loved to sit like this on the very edge of the boat, and it seemed to her that she was not riding on the boat, but flying low over the water, like an Indian goddess, sitting on an invisible flying mat. It had been 5 years since Daddy had been gone, and now there was no one to look after the old boat. Lisa's husband, the jovial joker John, has no interest in the boat. He has little interest in anything but beer and soccer. Is she so wrong about him? A few years ago, trying to please her, the daughter of an academic, he took her to theaters, classical concerts, dressed in costumes, and listened to Wagner with her and her father. And then, when they got married, he listened to Wagner for a while too, though Lisa was already well aware that he didn't need it at all. And now he watched soccer downstairs and drank beer every night. No, Lisa didn't mind at all, to each his own, but why did he have to pretend like that? Now she was disgusted by his pretense and wanted to leave so that she wouldn't see him sitting in her father's favorite chair, with his feet up on the low antique table, eating fish on the newspaper, throwing the scales right on the floor, and drinking beer with his friend Kevin, who came to their cottage from the city almost every weekend. Lisa then went away, upstairs in the attic, and painted her still lifes there. Peonies, poppies, field cornflowers in big empty jugs or in light transparent bottles. Her friend Molly, a classmate, came to visit her from the city too. She and Molly had been friends since childhood, since first grade, and they knew everything about each other and shared their deepest secrets. Molly was her complete opposite. Lisa is fragile, shy, was very sickly as a child, missed school every now and then, came down with another sore throat. Molly is athletic, tall, sturdy, bullied, always able to stand up for herself. They sat at the same desk, and Molly, seeing how draws in notebooks dreamy neighbor, admired from the bottom of her heart. "Wow, how do you do it?" "I don't know." Lisa shrugged her shoulders. "I just see it in my head and repeat it." "You're an artist." Molly said affirmatively, and this statement defined Lisa's future profession. She did go to art school after 9th grade, and then to the famous Watercolor Academy. Now she herself was already a teacher at this academy, and Molly was a successful coach master of sports in athletics. So different, they nevertheless always found something to talk about and continued to be friends, although it would seem what they could have in common. Molly, the daughter of intelligent parents in a city apartment, my mother even had a servant. My father was an academician of the Russian Academy of Sciences, a respected man, and my mother was also a famous musician, played the piano, taught at the conservatory, and at home gave open lessons. Now there is no mom, no dad, there is only one Lisa and Molly, a loyal, reliable friend on whom you can always rely. Not adapted in the domestic plan Lisa, she always helped out, at least to get tickets, at least a big cleaning at the cottage, everything. All this was organized by Molly, and many other things too. Lisa just couldn't do without Molly, and John was terribly angry at first when they first started living together. "What's she doing here all the time? Doesn't she have her own things to do?" "Why do you do that, John?" Lisa answered with a slight reproachful tone. "She's my friend. We're practically like sisters, you know?" "But I married you." John continued to resent her. "Not that sister of yours. Whenever I come home, she's right there, unashamedly lying on our bed. How is that even possible? And she comes out of the bathroom in your robe. I thought she was you from the back the other day. She's sitting at the table by the mirror, with your bath turban on her head, a robe and a mask on her face. I couldn't make it out in the bright light. I came closer. I wanted to hug her, and she started laughing. What, honey? Did you get it wrong? Anyway, you do what you want, but it's got to stop. John went on, I don't want to live in a threesome, and I hope you don't either. That's disgusting. Lisa corrected herself squeamishly. I'm sure you misunderstood her. Molly's just a fun person who likes to joke. You know, she has a hard time at home. So what? You don't want her to pray with us? I know. John waved me off. Come on, let her. Just tell her to shut up or something. But that was a long time ago. The first year or two of their life together. Then John got used to this state of affairs and didn't mind when Molly fried pancakes in their kitchen or washed windows to help Lisa, who suffered from vertigo. Molly's own home wasn't exactly sweet. She lived in a tiny 2-room apartment with her mother, a half-paralyzed grandmother, and an alcoholic father in the farthest and dustiest factory industrial district. Lisa and the whole family always felt very sorry for her and tried to help her, to buy her a dress, a blouse for holidays, or groceries, ashamed to embarrass her if she seemed inappropriate. Father, bringing tickets to various children's events, Christmas trees, theaters, concerts, and making out vouchers to pioneer camps, never forgot about his daughter's girlfriend, and Molly and Lisa were everywhere together. As they grew older and their interests and studies grew, they were separated a bit. Lisa traveled to gliders with her school, Molly to training camps and competitions, but when they met after separation, they couldn't talk enough. Now that Lisa and John lived mostly in the country, Molly lived in their city apartment, and it was better for her to have a break from annoying relatives and to look after the living space. On weekends, she, if there was no competition or traveling, came to visit them. Molly was not married, nor did she aspire to be. She said with a laugh, "Good men have long ago all taken away. You, Lisa, lucky. You are always lucky. You are happy, and such as me, apparently not supposed to." She laughed gaily, trying to hide her sadness, and immediately rushed either to do the dishes or to cook something delicious in Lisa's big, beautiful kitchen. "I'll be there for you, like a pet." Molly laughed when Lisa convinced her that she would find her destiny. "Molly, you're so sweet." Lisa hugged her, barely reaching her tall friend. "You're like family to me. Do you want me to ask John to introduce you to someone at work?" "No." Molly shook her head. "That's kind of silly. If fate throws up a bow, so be it. And if not, well, I'll be with you my age to roost." She laughed again and kissed her friend on the cheek. "Cheer up, Lisa." As if Lisa were the one who had been deprived of her fate, and not she herself. Molly was not in today. 2 days ago, she had left for another training camp to train young athletes, and in a few days Lisa herself was leaving for practice, for nature, as the artist said, also to train children to paint landscapes. It was stuffy in the bright attic, and the dust flew, spiraling in the sunlight. Lisa suddenly felt so wistful. She got up from behind her easel, stretched, and opened the door. She could still hear the muffled muttering of the television from downstairs, but no one was yelling as loud as they could. Goal, goal. Apparently, the broadcast of the soccer match had already finished, and John and Kevin, just sitting around drinking beer, and the TV was muttering to itself. Lisa went downstairs to pour herself some tea and found that no one was in the spacious kitchen living room anymore. She turned off the TV, put the kettle on, and went outside, and by the garage she saw a startling sight. Her own husband and Kevin, a friend of hers, pulling Dad's boat out into the light of day and busily working on it. Lisa smiled happily. "It's beautiful. I guess I was wrong to underestimate him. So what if it's beer? He can if he wants to." Happy, she ran down the steps and past the flower beds. Molly did her best. Who else could? Walked to the garage. "John, are you fixing the boat?" "Uh-huh," nodded her husband. "I've had enough of it sitting in the garage. You said you wanted to go for a ride. Work here, of course, a lot, but nothing. When you get back from your internship, Molly will be here. We'll go for a ride on the pond, and Kevin won't mind, right, man?" He elbowed his friend in the side. He grinned. Why not? Lisa sat down in a deck chair in the garden and sat happily, half closing her eyes, dozing off and watching the guys fiddling with the boat. "How happy I am after all," she thought. All her bad mood due to her husband's unkempt habits, his dislike for what constituted her interests, flew away into that blue June sky on which white fluffy clouds lazily crept. All people are different, Lisa thought. Molly and I aren't alike, and we've been friends almost all our lives. John has a right to live his life the way he likes. What am I saying? The main thing is that we love each other, and she gave herself a promise not to get irritated over nothing and not to demand too much from those close to her. When Lisa arrived home after practice, cheerful and a little tired, her nose burnt to a red-brown color, she found that Molly had beaten her to it. "And I'm back a couple days ahead of you," reported her friend, hugging the slim Lisa tightly. "Oh, let me in." Lisa laughed. "Your bones are cracking. You'll break them. You track and field athlete." Molly had already prepared an amazing dinner for her arrival. The men, John and Kevin, had roasted the meat. They opened a bottle of light white wine for her and Molly and drank beer as usual, but then also brandy, sweet for tea, said chuckling John, opening a bottle from his father's old stock. Lisa wanted to be indignant because they had agreed not to touch her father's bar unless it was absolutely necessary, but she restrained herself. And today was just such an occasion. They were waiting for her. They were trying, and she was going to make a showdown. Why did they open a collector's cognac? It's low. Dad would have said so. It's low and ugly. In the morning after breakfast, John, Molly, and Kevin, blindfolding her with a kerchief, solemnly led her to the pond, said surprise. Smiling Lisa guessed, of course, what the surprise was, but she didn't let on. She was trying to play the game of surprise and curiosity, but when they took off her handkerchief for a laugh, 3 times around its axis, Lisa did not pretend to aghast. My God, what a miracle! On the quay stood, barely bobbing on the water, a boat shining with new turquoise paint, and the inscription on the side, Elizabeth, in dark brown ochre, stood out brightly, flashing against the glossy azure. Thank you, thank you. She threw herself around John's neck and then hugged her friend tightly and even kissed the cheek of an embarrassed Kevin, who was blushing with embarrassment. Thank you, guys. Wait, there's more. And Molly ceremoniously handed her a large cardboard box. Is it just me or is it someone's birthday today, huh? Happy birthday. The boys cheered and popped a bottle of champagne. Barely breathing, Lisa pulled a tiny kitten out of the box. Oh my God, Molly, her eyes filled with tears. Oh, it's so cute. Do you like it? Molly perked up. You ask. Lisa clutched the baby to her chest. How wonderful you are, how fluffy. He's tricolored, see. Molly proudly pointed her finger at the tiny body. I'm told tricolored brings happiness. I'm already the happiest in the world. Lisa almost burst into tears of delight and emotion. "I have you so. All right, all right." She was stopped by her friend. "We're the best, of course." And she laughed, throwing back her head, loudly, joyfully, reminding something of a prancing horse. And now sitting, as in her childhood, on the bow of the boat that had come back to life, Lisa felt a deep sense of peace. How good it felt! Her daddy's old favorite boat, which he had once given her when she was 5 years old for her birthday, pretentiously and lavishly named Elizabeth, was back in service. Here she is silently gliding on the water surface of the pond, cutting through the cassava, algae, breaking through the thickets of lilies. Oh, look, a kingfisher! And another one, and another one. Lisa laughed happily, showing her friends a flock of bright azure birds that flew up in a scattering of jewels near the shore. There were always their nests here, I remember. How long had it been since she had ridden like this on this old pond? What a magical beauty it is here. Hey, on the boat. Suddenly it sounded nearby. Watch out! Cutting through the calm, standing water, a motorboat was rushing towards them, roaring and blasting fountains of spray with its propeller, leaving behind a real whirlpool. Look out! The motorboat was getting closer and closer. Lisa stared at the flying jet ski in amazement, and at some point she realized that it was going to hit them. Stop! Stop! She screamed, and their own boat, already rocking on the waves, raised by the motorboat and shaking left and right. She was sitting in a Turkish way, as in her childhood, and frantically grabbed the side with her hand. John was yelling and cursing at the top of his voice, waving his oar, trying to push off and avoid a collision. The guy sitting in the motorboat, diving goggles halfway down his face, disheveled gray hair, some kind of tattered t-shirt, was desperately twisting the wheel and yelling back. "It's jammed! Turn, turn, turn." Boom, terrible jolt, noise, crack. Lisa, unable to keep her balance, falls into the water, very near the dreaded spinning propeller. Lisa screams terribly, hides in the depths, and the calm, bright water in the pond is colored a sickening dark red. No, no! As if through a thick blanket, she hears Molly's shrill scream, and she tries to scream something herself, but draughty cold water pours into her mouth, into her nose, into her throat, into her lungs, and a bright flash explodes in her head, and a terrible tearing pain and darkness. One continuous impenetrable darkness and silence, no pain, no sounds, no nothing. The other half not visible either, swathed in white cloth. Pain, eerie, still developing in two. Lisa wants to scream at the top of her voice again, but only a suppressed mooing comes out. She's awake, add anesthesia. Warmth envelops her. The bright light is veiled by a white cloth. The jackhammer is no longer pounding in her head. Good, she can sleep. Lisa didn't finally regain consciousness until a week after the accident at the pond. She had been kept in a medically induced coma the whole time. The painful shock of the terrible injuries was too great. A motorboat propeller had severely damaged her spine and almost ripped off one foot. At the clinic where she was brought, an old surgeon, a friend of Lisa's father, seeing in the patient's chart her rare middle name, worriedly poked his finger. This is not the daughter of Academician Vishnevsky. We do not know. The residents waved their hands. The surgeon ordered to make inquiries. At the post asked the relatives, and the information was confirmed. It was indeed Elizabeth, the daughter of the same academician. "Hang in there, Lisa," said the doctor. "You'll make it, no matter what it costs me." It cost both her and the doctor a week and a half without rest and almost no sleep. Lisa was under anesthesia and on tranquilizers the entire time. The surgeon on cigarettes and coffee. But in the end, he managed to get her out and reattach her foot and reassemble her spine. Now all we had to do was wait to see if it worked or not. Where are her relatives? With red, watery eyes, the surgeon came out of the operating room. Let them know it was a success. Tomorrow, if it's an uneventful night, we can move her to intensive care. Molly and John were sitting in the spacious country kitchen of the academician's house and drinking beer when the phone rang and John was informed that his wife had been successfully operated on for the third and final time, and now all they had to do was wait for her to wake up. Will she walk? Concerned, John asked. He was told that it was too early to say anything about that. Shit. John threw the phone on the couch. Survivor. Molly was silent and concentrating on chewing crab chips. Finally, wiping her hands with a napkin and taking a sip from her bottle, she looked up with angry eyes. I told you not to call an ambulance, motherfucker. She threw the empty bottle at the sideboard. The polished wood gave a resounding thump. The bottle shattered into splinters, and the antique glassware on top of it clinked pitifully. Look out, rumbled John. Don't beat up the antiques. Fuck you. Spit on the floor, Molly, with your antiques. What? Did you bite it? She's alive. Your wife is alive. And still wakes up, calculates everything herself or with someone else's help, and will throw us out of here. And that's only in the best case, Already Molly was yelling, out of fear and rage. And if you coward had done as I said, we would be in the chocolate now, yes. Calm down, Molly. John walked over to her and put his arm around her shoulders as she sat in the padded chair. Molly, let's not do this, okay? We're so good together. We'll think of something. I already have a plan, Molly. I mean, think about it. What would we look like if we hadn't called an ambulance right away? I'd be in jail right now, and I'd be dead. We have to be careful, you know. Careful, step by step. Okay, Molly has softened up a bit. But what about this one? What if it cracks? No, John said firmly. He's already there. And he shook his head vaguely. They won't get him from that side. No one will even look for him. She's an academic's daughter, for crying out loud, said Molly. Yes, they will. Nobody cares about that academician now. Shook his head, John. Don't be so naive. There will be questions we will close, just as with no. But where will you get so much? Now this house and apartment and everything else that's there is hers again. Or rather, yours never was. It didn't work out. It will work out, you'll see. John winked. Don't worry, you can count on me. He hugged Molly again and kissed her. Shall we go and relieve some stress? No way. She half-jokingly fought back, but after a few minutes she changed her mood, and the sweet couple went up the stairs to the second-floor bedroom. The large window opposite Lisa's bed accommodated little. A sprawling old poplar tree, stitched over the top with power line wires and the slice of sky on the side. That was all. The night landscape differed from the day landscape in that the tangled mesh of poplar branches lit up the lanterns of the hospital square and drained an unsettling bright yellow light. Lisa was afraid to look at these distant lights shivering in the darkness, and she asked the nurses to close the blinds. The tattered one had another seizure. The nurses and orderlies spoke to each other and shook their understanding heads. Go, give her an injection. Lisa was brought a thick syringe on gauze, lying in an iron cuvette, bent in an irregular oval, and a painful injection was given through a catheter. Afterward, it felt as if a burning, tissue-spreading poison had entered the vein. But after a minute, the sensation passed, The whole body was covered with a relaxed and pleasant languor, and there was peace at last. All day long Lisa waited for this evening injection, and already at dusk she began to worry. Why don't they light the lanterns? It was already time. It would soon be dark. Would you look at them? She asked the nurse. I can't see very well. They'll light up. They'll light up. A kind old woman calmed her down. They'll light up in 20 minutes. How could they not? These 20 minutes seemed like an eternity to Lisa, and she twisted in the bunk as much as she could, but she could only move her arms and head. She couldn't feel her lower part at all. Finally, the damn lights would come on, and after another half hour, the cherished injection would come. That was it. One could sleep and think of nothing, sleep until morning, or better yet, until next year, or quite well, fall asleep and never wake up again. Where she would wake up, there would again be fear, pain, uncertainty, dread of the future, and the bitter, piercing thought, why don't John and Molly come to see her? It's only been 3 days since they put you in intensive care. The nurse comforted her. We can't yet, Germs. Your husband calls every day, asking how you are. What's wrong with you? Don't you worry, my dear. Soon he'll come to see you and prescribe new medications. Sam, respectfully called the junior medical staff of the chief surgeon, the pride and luminary of the whole hospital, and the unquestionable authority of the doctor expressed in the fact that the name of the patronymic he almost never called, only said respectfully. He did the operation himself, he said it himself, he appointed it himself. And if suddenly the newcomers, not having found out the local subordination, suddenly asked, for example, and who is your chief here? They answered without any thought as to how it would sound to the untrained ear. What do you mean who himself? He himself came the day after tomorrow, as promised by the nurse, and for a long time tapped Lisa's legs with a hammer, put sensors and spun wheels, and looked at the monitor screen, frowning and dictating something curtly to the attentive and diligent assistant. Left sinus, no activity. Right sinus, minimal activity. Contraction interval, rhythm frequency, and other words and expressions incomprehensible to anyone but doctors. The surgeon sighed and sat down on the chair next to Lisa. How are you, Lisa? Scared, the girl admitted. Samuel, am I going to stay lying down forever? It is still very early to make any predictions. The doctor answered her evasively. Believe me, honey, I did everything I could. And I can do a lot, especially when it comes to the daughter of my old friend. But now you must also try, calm down first of all. Our nerves decide almost everything in such cases. Our attitude, you know, sweetheart? Yes, Lisa nodded. I understand. Well, come on, calm down. Don't think about bad things. I've put you back together in one piece. Do you really think it takes 2 days to put the pieces back together? He stroked her head affectionately. No, it's a long process. It takes a long rehab, a very long rehab. Now get some sleep, And when you wake up, change your bad mood, got it? I'll come back in 3 days to check on you. The surgeon wagged a pretend finger. Watch me. The door closed behind him and his assistant, and with them the faint hope that had been born in Lisa's heart also closed, hid somewhere, like a skittish cat, in the linen closet, and never showed itself again. Samuel. The receptionist stopped the doctor in the corridor. The investigator is there, he asks. When can we interview the patient from the 5th ward? Not now. Abruptly threw the doctor. Let him come later. But he will not leave, will he? Begrudgingly, said the girl. We'll say the exact date, name, and everything. tell him that the patient is on tranquilizers, the injury is very serious, and no testimony she cannot give now. Molly sat in the garden on Lisa's favorite chaise lounge and pondered. A brilliant plan to eliminate Lisa, who was annoying them both, had failed. And why had this worm proved so tenacious? How long, how carefully Molly had thought and planned everything. How many sleepless nights she spent preparing for this crucial day. What was it worth to find the right man, capable of such a deed, and even to ensure his disappearance? The entire huge consumer loan that John had taken out had been spent on these preparations. And there you have it. It's all gone. Shoo! She threw away the colorful kitten that had been lurking under her feet since the day they had so carefully prepared to celebrate Lisa's birthday. The kitten, mewing pitifully, jumped aside and disappeared into the flower bed among the lushly blooming peonies and lupines. After lunch, she and John had to go into town, to the hospital, and pretend love and friendship again. Damn it, Molly sighed heavily. She was so sick of this. All her life, for as long as she could remember, she'd had to adapt, lie and twist to survive. In the filthy room of the wooden house where she lived with her out-of-her-mind grandmother, it was necessary to ignore the stench and mess from an early age. Her grandmother often went under herself in her sleep, and also dragged some kind of junk from the dumps and spread it around in all the corners. In the next room, a little larger, lived Molly parents, Father Alcatch and Mother, tortured, exhausted, aged before her time, factory worker. When Molly first went to kindergarten, she, like most children, cried. In a clean, shining group, and kind-hearted teachers consoled her, Molly, do not cry. After lunch you will go home, your mother will come for you, don't cry. But little Molly kept sobbing and sobbing. She did not want to go home at all. Here in this abode of cleanliness and comfort, where it was so wonderful, tasty food from clean plates, and you could play as much as you want with new, standing on the shelves stacked, as in the store toys, she would gladly stay to live. No, no. Molly screamed throughout the locker room when her mother came to pick her up in the afternoon. The first week, they didn't leave the babies until the evening so they could adapt better. I don't want to. I don't want to go home. What is it with the child? Marveled educators. All crying want to go home, and she wants to stay with us. I guess it is not good for her at home. Summarized an elderly, experienced nanny. Look at her mother. A poor woman, you can see it right away. Caretakers looked closely, and in a few days it became quite clear how things are in Molly's family. The father is unemployed, kicked out for drunkenness. Mother's in a forging factory, working double shifts. Plus, they also have a half-wit grandmother, said quietly educator, neighbor Molly parents. They have such an odor from their apartment. At least take out the image. If they open the door when I go out into the entrance, I try not to even breathe. How do they live? The teacher grabbed her head. We have to report them to the guardianship office. 100 times reported. Waved away the neighbor. They came and looked. The family is complete. The mother works, does not drink, does not smoke. So there's no reason to take the child away. And the fact that the father mortgages and the grandmother with her keeping. So is that a reason? Half the country has such fathers, and the grandmother is sick. Where is she going? They'll warn the mother to take better care of her, and that's it. That's how it is. Educators, pitying little Molly, at the same time and horrified, complaining to each other during the shift change. It's something impossible, ashamed to say. Molly was brought in again in the same underpants. Imagine her mother just turning them inside out and everything. God, how will the poor child grow up in such conditions? In the end, the pedagogical council of the kindergarten found a way out. cautiously advised Molly mother, arrange a daughter in a boarding school. The head volunteered to help. You know, she convinced Molly mother. The children are very good there. There are children with developmental delays, of course, but not heavy, do not think. It is a garden for those who have difficult family circumstances. On weekends, you can take the girl home to the family, and you will be easier. Molly's mother didn't think for long, and after a month, little Molly finally found a peaceful shelter. To think, from this daycare center, one didn't have to go home. Bye, Mommy. Calmly, the 4-year-old turned her back to her mother and waved goodbye. I'm going. Even on weekends, she categorically refused to go home, and the educators on duty did not object to such company. The girl was a rare, independent, and sober-minded. In addition, all the forces tried to help the nannies, only if it would not give her home from here, and collected dishes and dusted and toys all neatly arranged. Even the commission to bring do not come to mind. A little mastered began and other children to call other children to order. Built and leveled the entire group like a real educator. Well, this girl will not be lost. Teachers grinned. No one will not give down, only to achieve their own. Molly really did not give, neither on the internet, nor at school, and even more so in the sports section. Strong, well-developed physically, she in the 2nd grade herself enrolled in the judo section, and by the 6th was already a master of sports in the junior category. From now on, she was not afraid of her father's anger. After she laid her father with a clever trick near the toilet, when he threatened to drown her head in the toilet bowl for some offense, as he had done many times before, Molly became a person untouchable in the house. She marked her new status by throwing her grandmother out of her room, along with her missing urine, bunk, and other filthy belongings. I don't want her ever coming back here again. Screaming all over the apartment. It's a shithole. Molly's mother, seeing this state of affairs, with shaking hands put the grandmother in a tiny pantry, but she didn't care anymore. She had no idea who she was or where she was. Molly was very active. She got long rubber gloves and dry bleach from the school cleaner and cleaned the whole apartment to a shine, including the toilet with a stinking, years unwashed toilet, and the bathroom and the kitchen, barely visible through the cigarette smoke and grease. I rewashed the shabby curtains, threw out all the junk, and at the end of it, I hit on my father. If I see you come home with a bottle again, I'll soak you till you bleed. With these hands, understand, and I'll add my feet. Drink your drink wherever you want, and you can die there at the same time. My father remained silent, hiccuping and writhing convulsively. The grandmother mumbled something behind the curtain in the pantry, and the mother, going into the kitchen, where Molly was concentrating on cooking something in open pots, sank down on a stool in tears. I've got a daughter of some sort, and that was all that a semi-literate, battered by fate, and an alcoholic husband, the woman was capable of expressing her feelings. Don't worry, Mammy, Molly hugged her. You know how we will live now. And they did heal in a new way. The father, who drank the last of his health, was afraid to openly contact his determined daughter. Grandmother's movements on the garbage dumps stopped simply not letting her out of the apartment. Molly almost forcibly took her mother to the authorities for certificates and to the social services, where they wrote out free diapers for a sick old woman, medicines and more allowance, in the form of some change and dry rations for the holidays. On these small transfers, Molly immediately got her paws on them. Without me, you would never have gotten them in your life. They will be for my pocket money. Having thus arranged her life, Perky Molly began further transformations, passed the standards for the Olympic Reserve, and entered the sports school. It was necessary to go to hell on the heels, on the other side of the city in the distance. But could such nonsense stop an armored, battle-hardened tank named Molly? More persistent than this girl was not a student, and by the end of the school year, she was already the head of the student council of the sports school, was the captain of the volleyball team, a prize winner of school, city and world competitions, and among the best, was going to the training camp in Bulgaria. Look me! She threatened her relatives that in my absence, everything was tip-top. I'll come and check. And on you, I'll find a solution. Don't worry. This is separate to her father. The next day, she brought home a guy, 3 years older, who put a lock on Molly's room. That's it. The border is locked, she grinned. No one gets in, no one gets through. Signed her mother's application for school, and closing her door, rolled away for a month and a half to Bulgaria. Thus, in the 7th grade, the paths of Molly, an athlete, the daughter of an alki and a semi-literate worker, and Lisa, an excellent student and artist, academically blue-blooded, could have separated forever, but something kept them close to each other. Perhaps it was the preferential treatment and gifts raining down on Molly from the generosity of Lisa's academic father, or perhaps it was the sincere light of hope and affection that lit up in Lisa's eyes at the sight of her beloved friend, or, for example, the pleasure of visiting a rich, cozy house where Lisa's mother, always carefully dressed and combed, sat with a book or knitting near a large window and smiled, slightly squinting her beautiful eyes. Girls, go wash your hands. Nancy made pudding for lunch today. And Nancy, a full-blown, ruddy-haired girl, happily bringing out of the sparkling clean kitchen incredibly delicious dishes. And how did people cook such things? And all this decent, comfortable, real life in which she, Molly, admitted only as a guest, over the years growing up and gaining experience, Molly more and more often began to ask herself the question, and why is it that some people have everything and others have nothing? Why not she, Molly, had such a rich house, delicious food, servants, and no problems, and the sickly, weak, and weak-willed, as Molly thought, Lisa? Well, yes, she had been lucky in life. She was born the daughter of an academic, but why does it always have to be that way? She is Molly, 100 times more worthy of a good life than this unfit, whiny worm who can't do anything useful. She can't cook, of course, all the maid at Mom did, and she's afraid to get her thin, weak fingers dirty with anything but her lousy, useless paints. She can hardly even pay the rent. Since her parents are gone, all household chores have fallen on Molly's shoulders. Look, Lisa showed her the piece of paper Lisa had thrown in the mailbox. It says it's time to have the meters checked. What's that? I don't even know who to call. Come on. Smiling indulgently, Molly tucked the folded paper into her pocket. I'll go to the housekeeping department next week. I'll have to make an application there. It's like that with everything. Absolutely everything. It got a little easier when that foolish fool somehow managed to get married. Molly herself had long since given up those silly teenage dreams. Here she will meet a beautiful prince who will solve all her financial problems and take her to a beautiful future on a white horse, that is, in a Mercedes, of course. In fact, the Prince Charming, at least the ones that Molly came across, needed only one thing. And that didn't include solving her problem and organizing a happy future. And where was she to get so much self-control and intelligence not to show the princess her immense strength, both physical and volitional? Those beautiful princes who hung out in rich restaurants and nightclubs, as well as hanging around at concerts and conservatories, were out of reach for her. She had it all obviously painted on her face. Here is a girl from the working class, and to take from her nothing. except for the very thing that interests any prince, only disposable. When Molly finally realized this, she was angry, really angry, terribly angry, to the point of a tugging pain in her knuckles. It turned out that she, who had everything, and worldly intelligence and wit, and the strength to twist any of the refined rich bastards into a ram's horn, would not see this beautiful life as their ears. And despite her athletic accomplishments, she'll never make it into high society. Why did she end up going down a slippery and criminal path? After all, she could have made her way further, to the top of the sports Olympus, where international champions sharply start upwards on a high-speed social elevator, getting at once everything that only the soul desires, and money, and status, and recognition. She probably would have made it in the end, but what prevented her was the black malice and envy that filled her corrupted heart. In the first adult season, not her, but another girl from a well-to-do and successful family, was chosen as a candidate for a major international competition. And since then, Molly finally disbelieved in the possibility of achieving something worthwhile, solely by their own efforts, but the need for this achievement, all sharpened her from the inside, eating her soul, did not give peace of mind to live. And so the fate of her poor friend Lisa was already sealed. Finally, Black Molly's plan took shape on the day when John, Lisa's newly married husband, mistook her for his young wife in the luxurious bathroom of their city apartment. That year, the last year of Lisa's father's life, bedridden with an incurable ailment, she and John became secret lovers. And Lisa didn't notice anything, living, as she always did, in her perfectly made-up world of rosy dreams. You keep an eye on him. Begging, she said to her friend as she left for the plain air, referring to her husband. Men are so unfit. You're the one who's unfit. Molly thought and smiled sweetly and replied, of course, darling. Don't worry. Drive safely. In fact, 4 of the 6 years of Lisa's marriage, they had already lived as a threesome, a kind of Swedish family, with the only difference being that one of the family members was unaware of this state of affairs. The hospital lobby was crowded. During visiting hours, relatives and friends came in droves to see the patients. Here and there, they unwrapped packages, rustling cellophane bags and paper wrappers, showed the strict nurse the food brought and sighing, put aside, not allowed to transfer things. Where to? John was confused, looking around. To the 3rd trauma, through the gatehouse, right to the elevator, and then to the 3rd floor. Molly said, You were told, remember? How do you keep it all in your head? John was amazed and obediently followed. When Molly approached the room, she took out a bouquet of country flowers, elegantly tied with a ribbon. Here, hand it over. She shoved it to her companion, and with a smile on her face, she sailed into the room. Hello, little girl, stretching the words and fondly fussing, as with a baby, gently hugged her friend. How are you, dear? We were so worried about you. Nothing, it's nothing. Lisa smiled weakly. It's so good that you finally came. They only let me in today. Molly made unhappy eyes. I was ready to tear them all to shreds, and she laughed at her own joke. Lisa smiled through her own strength, too. I know you can do anything. John swallowed convulsively, white as a sheet at the sight of his wife lying helplessly on the hospital bed, with no blood in her face, her transparent arms stretched out along her torso, and came quietly closer. Honey, here are your favorite flowers. I was so worried. Thank you. Lisa's eyes brightened for a moment at the sight of John and the flowers. Thank you, darling. Do you remember anything about what happened? Molly asked cautiously, looking into her friend's face. Lisa's features were distorted with suffering. Memories of the terrible pain came all at once. She closed her eyes and sighed convulsively, trying to cope with the panic that had built up. No. She shook her head and pulled her hand heavy to her temple. Later, it's all a blur. Okay, Molly muttered fearfully. Don't. I'm sorry. Let's not talk about it just yet. She stroked Lisa's thin arm affectionately. It's all behind you now. Soon you'll be quite well. You'll come home. We'll put you on the veranda. It's nice and fresh there. You'll watch the leaves fall. And how is Trishka? Lisa suddenly asked, opening her eyes. Who? Molly didn't understand. My kitten, Trishka. I named him Tricolor, Aka Tricolor. Lisa explained. That's why it's Tricolor. Eh? Molly stretched out, smiling. There's nothing wrong with that kitten. He's already ripping the curtains in the kitchen. He's cute. Lisa's eyes shone warmly. How I want to pet him. You will. Molly promised. You will. Don't you worry about anything. John sat down on the edge of the bed and kissed his wife on the forehead. We're fine, and so is Trishka. Your students have already cut all the wires. He grinned. They called, they come, they ask when they can visit you. They wish you a speedy recovery, of course. Tell them that I love them all very much. Lisa said softly, very much. And I love you too. What would I do without you both? She looked at her two favorite people, her husband and her friend, and sighed contentedly. Seeing you made my heart feel better. We'll come back often now. Molly promised. Soon you'll be able to eat everything. I'll make you some cakes. I really want your pies. Lisa smiled. You're my sunshine. I just don't know how much more I can take. Molly exhaled as she left the room. I'm exhausted. You'll get through this. John patted her on the shoulder. You're strong. Too strong. Molly thought bitterly. I'm so sick of this. Let's go have a smoke, she said to her lover. We still have to go to the investigator tomorrow. For the first time, they were questioned almost immediately on the day when everything happened. The turmoil, the general shouting, Kevin's eyes bulging with fear. They needed him with them as an impartial witness, which was why they'd invited him from out of town. The scurrying and frightened Dacha neighbors, the ambulance shrill, shrieking with all its sirens. You don't need to call anyone. Drop the call. Quietly and insistently, Molly said to the frightened John, while he was frantically poking at the buttons of his phone. At the same time, on the grass, covered with Lisa's fresh blood, a dazed Kevin was trying to give her CPR. He dragged her, mangled and bloody, to the shore, yelling and cursing at her and interspersing his shouts with a foul language. Don't you understand? John hissed at Molly. Now the neighbors will call an ambulance. Look what a crowd. And the police will call too. What will I say later that I couldn't get through? No, this is how it's going to be. Look at her. Can she really wake up after something like that? And with shaky hands, he pulled a cigarette out of the pack. Lisa. Molly, pretending to be desperate, threw herself again to her friend lying on the grass, seeing the neighbors running around. What on earth was going on? Who thought to put this rusty iron on the water? The guy who was driving the motorboat had disappeared, and now it was rolling on the water from side to side, standing, banging the engine not turned off near the shore, kicking up sand and green cassava. Somebody. Molly begged, turn off that damn motorboat, for God's sake. The man's neighbors immediately went to turn it off, and after a while earned the curses of the operatives who arrived on the scene. Why the hell did they get in the boat? Now they've got all the fingerprints covered. They didn't know there were no prints, because the hired kid was driving the boat, wearing the thin and transparent nitrile gloves Molly had given him. It was impossible to see this fact from afar, and nobody remembered his appearance. Dark hair, I think. Kevin said uncertainly, shaggy and crazy eyes. Have you seen this man before? We asked all the eyewitnesses one by one. No, they were shaking their heads, and so was Kevin. Never seen here, never seen anything like this at our dachas. He looked like an Armenian or an Azerbaijani, Kevin recalled, wrinkling his forehead, or maybe a Tajik or a Korean. The operative smirked. I don't know. The interviewee was confused. It was far away at first, and then no one looked at him. So what was wrong with his eyes? The question was directed at Molly. He was wearing glasses. She told the operatives confidently. Big diving goggles, so I don't know what kind of eyes were under there. She spread her hands and suddenly howled thinly and pitifully, like a she-wolf who lost her Volchenka. Find him, find him. I beg you. Find the bastard. Lisa, my friend. She's like a sister to me, you know. Molly screamed and sobbed, her face swollen with tears, and to all further questions addressed to her, she only shook her head stubbornly and sobbed. Lisa, my friend. The girl is hysterical, indifferently stated the operatives. You see, she was taken to the medics. The ambulance arrived, loaded Lisa into the car with all possible precautions, and drove off with a shrill screech, leaving the paramedic in the village. Taya, take care of the shockers. The doctor commanded the woman and jumped into the departing car. We'll send the locals for you as soon as they get here. The paramedic covered Molly with a blanket, gave her a sedative injection, and told John to give her tea. Do you have any valerian, chamomile, peppermint? I don't. In despair broke his hands. I don't know. There's something in the locker over there. He didn't even have to pretend panic and horror. He was already in that state, only not from the fact of what had happened, but from the fact that his wife was still breathing when the ambulance arrived. Is she gonna be okay? Do you think she'll be all right? Every now and then, he asked the paramedic, concentrating on the jars in the kitchen cupboard. I'm not a doctor. She fought back at first, but her inconsolable husband wouldn't let up, so she had to come clean. You must brace yourself and prepare for the worst, young man. I've seen a lot. The injuries are too serious. For sure, if Lisa had fallen into the hands of another surgeon, it would have been all over for her. But for her luck, or maybe for her misfortune, it was myself who was on duty at the trauma center that day. A month after the described events, there was some improvement in her condition. Instruments showed that the nerves in her spine were responding to the irritation. But why can't she move her legs? John asked the attending physician with a dejected face. You see, he replied, with this kind of trauma, the internal connections in the body are disturbed. How to put it simply? The brain does not react sufficiently to the fact that the spine can function again. There's like this natural blockage. You need long rehabilitation, special exercises. A special specialist deals with such patients. We recommend you after discharge. You don't have to worry. Finally, the investigator broke through to Lisa and, putting on a white coat, entered the room. Good afternoon. I'm the investigator in your case. You must tell me everything you remember about the day of the accident. I don't remember much. Lisa's eyes filled with pain and tears. It was so terrible, so swift. Yes, I understand, the investigator said softly, but still you must try. What did the man who was driving the motorboat look like? Like a big frog, said Lisa. A big and bug-eyed frog. No, not even a toad, you know? Not really. The investigator shook his head. Try to describe your impressions in more detail. There was something wrong with his eyes, Lisa said with effort. And the hands, they were some. Like what? The investigator stepped forward. Slippery. Suddenly, Lisa realized what she was feeling. His hands were slippery, sticky. How can you say that if you haven't touched his hands? The man clarified. I don't know. Lisa shook her head. It just seemed that way. All right. The investigator sighed tiredly. Let's write it down in the protocol. Sign here, please. You see, it's written down for my words and so on. None of the testimonies of the uninjured, not those given by eyewitnesses, did not help the investigation because the criminal who drove the motorboat had long ago crossed the border of the country, leaving immediately after his pernicious deed in a car with a buddy waiting for him in a nearby grove. Molly found this man moonlighting at neighboring dachas in another settlement, not in the academic one, and promising big money for him. Explained what had to be done. A rusty motorboat, they had long looked out for at an old boat shed, and one day under the cover of night, these two accomplices brought a working engine, bought at a flea market, unknown from whom, no receipt, no possibility of finding out, did not leave clever Molly to the investigation, and then took her out and sneaked her to the pond, where they hid, disguised by a stretched awning and a pile of branches. Such a sight was not new to dacha dwellers. Every now and then someone sawed and cut old fruit trees, throwing discarded branches as they pleased. It's disgraceful, they've dragged a pile of cuttings again. The dacha dwellers were squeamishly wrinkling their nose, bypassing the obstacles. That was the end of it. Apparently, Lisa turned out to be much stronger than everyone thought. She was getting better every day, but only with one half of her body. The lower half was still not obeying her. One afternoon, she was approached by a fit, muscular man with nice brown eyes. Lisa, good afternoon. Hello. Lisa was surprised. I don't believe we've met before. He wasn't wearing a medical uniform, just light sports clothes, so she didn't understand why some stranger had come and was calling her by name. So we've met. The guest smiled. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm your physical therapist and exercise coach, William, he added. Nice to meet you. Lisa sighed with relief. Did I think that one of the visitors had gotten the wrong room? No, William laughed. I'm attached to you now. He looked at Lisa affectionately and kindly. I apologize for what I'm about to do, but you'll have to bear with my interference. Ready? Yes. Lisa nodded apprehensively. I guess so. Then let's begin. He gently felt her whole body with his strong and warm fingers, starting, oddly enough, with her head. He massaged her temples, the back of her head, her collarbones, turned her hands back and forth, wrote something down on the clipboard he'd brought, frowned. Then he said something incomprehensible to Lisa. Let's you and I try to move our tongues. Watch like this. I'll show you. And as a result, for 15 minutes, they made different faces, opened and closed their mouths, and made all sorts of sounds. What's all this for? Asked the tired Lisa in the end. Everything in our body is connected. William answered her. It seems to you that the tongue and the locomotor system have nothing to do with each other. But in fact, this is completely wrong. When we exercise with our tongue, it has a very effective effect on our pelvic floor, and our legs are attached to it. Do you see the connection? Sort of. Lisa nodded. But, I'm just so tired. It's just as it should be. The doctor smiled, because now all your muscles have been working together. But I'm going to look at your lower extremities now, and you relax, okay? If you feel anything, tell me immediately. Don't be shy. Anything, even the faintest sensation. Lisa closed her eyes and prepared to feel the sensations. Minutes passed, but nothing happened, so it seemed to her. But here was something like a slight warmth or tingling. She couldn't make it out and said as she opened her eyes, "I think I felt something just now." "When exactly?" William raised his head. "Just now." He moved his hand down to his toes, and Lisa nodded affirmatively. "Yes, I think so." "Good." The satisfied doctor covered her legs with the blanket again and straightened up. "Well, see you tomorrow, Lisa. I'll see you at the same time tomorrow." From that first day, she waited for these appointments as she used to wait for her evening injections. These injections had been canceled long ago, and at first she was very painful, feeling a terrible desire to experience again that wonderful feeling of envelopment and lightness, and then complete indifference to everything, which came after the injection. But the doctor said everything. It was no longer possible. For a week and a half, Lisa was in a disgustingly irritated state in the evenings, but there was nothing she could do about it. She had to get used to the fact that she would no longer get the shots she wanted. Now classes were the new soothing for her. When he came into the room with him, joy, hope entered. When he withdrew, clouds covered the sky, and at home in the academic cottage, Molly and John held a council of war. By this time they had been dragged through the offices of the investigation department, and with each visit they grew more anxious. No more waiting. Molly persuaded her lover. "We can't wait any longer." "But how? How do we do it?" He fought back. "There are a lot of people there, doctors, nurses. We need to wait until we take home." "That's your indecision." Molly was angry. "What? What's my indecision?" John jumped up and down. "Do you think I'm the reason she wasn't killed by a screw?" "What does that have to do with me?" "You should have steered the boat sharper." Molly yelled. "Sharper, you know? You should have steered it yourself." John snapped at her and went to the veranda to smoke, but she wouldn't leave him alone. "Oh, so that's it. Not only that I planned and organized everything, not only that I came up with the perfect scenario, found performers, and calculated everything down to the last detail. And you, what did you do, I ask you? Who took the credit? I couldn't stand John. The money for everything for this event, who got it, huh? Or do you think it came out of thin air? You should have acted more quickly. I'd have paid back my loan by now." Molly parried, but softened a little at this reminder. "Let's not, asked the softer John. "So it's already over the top. Can we at least stop squabbling among ourselves?" He admired Molly, admired her determination, perseverance, willpower. He was crazy about her beautifully trained body and what she did with it, too. Lisa had never been able to do that and didn't want to. He'd married her for money, having met her by chance at her art academy, where he'd come to fix the wiring. John was a good electrician. He knew and loved his work, had the highest tolerance, and with closed eyes could tell zero from ground. Professional terms for the voltage present in a cable. Delicate and beautiful as a fragile spring flower, the girl attracted him by her defenselessness, her trustworthiness, her unlike all the other women he usually dealt with. When it turned out that she was also the daughter of a famous academician who had a lot of material wealth, which John so aspired to, he added momentum, and soon they had already set the date of the wedding. Lisa's mother has long since left her relatives, settled down in the Central City Cemetery, and could not tell her daughter that such hasty and unequal marriages are very rarely successful, and the choice of the future husband is a little strange. But what could be in common with her, raised by caring parents with love, intelligent to the marrow of his bones, received the best education, passionate about painting, a young girl and a working electrician who finished 9 grades in the school, and the father was already too ill to be well-oriented in what was happening. Perhaps it was this circumstance that pushed Lisa into the arms of the handsome electrician. She was insanely afraid of being alone. "What do you think of him?" Shy and blushing, she asked her faithful friend Molly. She squinted her eyes and winked. "Everything seems to be in order. Did you check the working machine?" "What machine?" Lisa didn't understand, and having understood, with the help of her friend, the essence of the joke, she blushed thickly. "Come on, Molly, don't joke like that, please. I'd forgotten that you're a fairy princess." Molly teased her chaste friend, saving herself for the one and only. "Don't, Molly," Lisa confused. "Why would you do that?" All right. Molly threw up her hands in a conciliatory manner. "All right, I'm out. I made a bad joke. I'm sorry, I'm a fool." "You're not stupid at all." Good Lisa gently stroked her friend's arm. "You just have a different upbringing. You know, I wish I could be like you, as brave, as independent." Lisa sighed. "But you can't. I am who I am, and so are you, and it's not our fault. It's not our fault." Molly agreed lightheartedly. "Come on, enough of this." At the very end of September, Lisa was finally discharged home. Now she moved around the house in a wheelchair, accompanied everywhere by a nurse, and was a terrible burden to John and Molly. William came to see her 3 times a week for remedial exercise, and the rest of the time, if she was awake, she sat on the big glass veranda, sketching or working on endless still lifes and landscapes. "Now it's time," said Molly, one evening. "And don't mind anymore. I've already made an appointment for Wednesday. Don't worry, it'll be fine." Seeing how John's face changed, she put her warm and strong palm on one knee. "Just a little more and we'll be free." "Are you sure?" He looked at her, concerned. "Quite sure." Tomorrow they left to get passports and returned in high spirits, with beer, lavender tea for Lisa, and a large cake. "Baby," John called out as he entered the veranda. "We're back. The cake's here. Let's go and have tea." "Okay," she smiled at him. Now, the executive nurse helped her gather her brushes and paints, and after rolling her to the dining room, she left to wash the collected art supplies. Molly, smiling like a fox, showed Lisa a large packet of pills. "Look what I bought. A friend recommended it. She says it helps you sleep well and relieves anxiety. Shall we try it?" "You're my good, caring friend." Lisa was touched. It did not occur to her to doubt the good intentions of her dear friend. "Of course we'll try it, because everything is dreaming different things. My head is cracking as I close my eyes. My heart is fluttering, as if it is about to jump out. And the ones the neurologist prescribed are not helping. You'll tell me later how the effect is." Molly handed her a glass of water and a large oval pill. "Swallow it carefully." Lisa woke up the next morning as good as new. She had no headache, and a pleasant alertness in all her muscles. What a great drug! Excitedly, she said to Molly and John at breakfast, "I had such a good night's sleep." "There you go." Molly rejoiced. "My friend's doctor told me to take it 3 times a day. It makes you drowsy and doesn't cause drowsiness." "That's great. That's just great." Did not get tired of praising Lisa. Approved medicines. "By the way, Lisa," said Molly, taking a bite out of her sandwich, "we wanted to talk to you about something. There's a lot of things to do while you were in the hospital. Utilities, the electric meter needs to be changed in the city, to register your disability temporarily, to extend your vacation at work, to open a special account for Social Security to transfer benefits, and other stuff. It's very inconvenient and pathetic to drive you every time." "Yes," Lisa frowned. What to do? I found out. Excitedly, Molly continued, that you can get a special power of attorney from a notary with all the rights so that everything can be done without you. Expensive, of course, but no matter what the issue at any time, you do not need to bother. Can you imagine how convenient? Great, Lisa nodded. Sure, let's do it. But there's probably a queue. We'll have to agree on a specific time. I've already agreed. Molly winked. There won't be any lines. The notary will come right here to us, a little more expensive, but not to pull you. How clever you are, Molly. Lisa looked at her friend with genuine admiration. I would never have thought of it myself. We'll do it for you, right? Aha! Molly smiled proudly. I am. Just don't do it on me. We're legal strangers to you. She waved her hands in frustration. They'll charge a lot of money. You'll sign for John. It's cheaper for the spouses. Hurriedly and minute by minute, looking at her watch, the lady notary arrived half an hour late. They were getting nervous that she wouldn't arrive at all. But they explained it to you, didn't they? Transactions today, it takes a lot of time. It is impossible to calculate to the minute. She snapped at them. Where's the patient? This way, please. Molly went to the veranda. Lisa, the notary, is here. Sitting without her easel for the occasion, Lisa turned around. Hello, hello, said the lady, pulling papers out of her briefcase. What's your name? Lisa. Why? Name and surname, your patronymic and your year of birth, as it is supposed to be. The lady replied irritably, not looking at Lisa, and writing something in a thick, huge book. Oh, I see. Elizaveta Vishnevskaya. After a minute, having torn herself away from the notes, she said, familiarize yourself with the text of the power of attorney. Oh, so much. Lisa was amazed. Do I have to read it all? As you wish, the notary said dryly. I inform you that the power of attorney with the right to manage and dispose of all your property is issued in the name of your spouse, John. Year of birth, passport data, registration is made on a special form, recorded in the electronic registry. If you want to cancel, she kept saying something, in Lisa's head. Every word was a mess. The lines danced in front of her eyes and merged into colored, ugly spots. Do you understand? The notary's last question brought her out of her stupor. Yes, she nodded, wishing only one thing, that this unpleasant stranger would leave their house as soon as possible. Everything is clear. Where do I sign? Here. Brief signature and full name, surname, first name, middle name. Okay, now the same here. Okay, now it's in the register. How many can I do? Lisa thought to herself, carefully writing out line by line in her handwriting. That's it? That's it. The notary noisily slammed the register shut. All the best to you, and to you, mechanically repeated Lisa, and leaned back with relief on the cushion lying in the stroller. In a couple days, John, said Lisa. Lisa, you will need to go into town for a while. Molly's your nurse with you, of course, and I have to stay here. What's the matter? Lisa got worried. The heating system has to be repaired. The boiler's going out. You will all freeze here when we turn off the heating, but it must be done. Otherwise, the house will freeze in winter if the boiler breaks down. What a horror! Lisa sighed convulsively. More misfortunes. What kind of trouble is that, little one? John smiled affectionately at his wife. It's nothing. It's just going to take some time. And away they went. Gray and boring city days stretched on. There was no spaciousness and air of the dacha. There was no big and bright, glassed-in veranda. And Molly became irritable and always angry, always going somewhere, going away, answering the phone every now and then, trying to go out almost in the entrance so that Lisa could not hear what she was talking about. "Molly, what's wrong?" Lisa asked her friend, but she just mumbled something vague and waved her off. "Later, Lisa, later. I told you I have a lot of things to do. I'll clear everything up, and we'll go with you to the cottage again. How's the heating, dear?" Lisa asked her husband on the phone. "How much longer?" "Almost finished," he reported. "I've also done a little electrical work while I'm still at work in the fall. Anyway, a couple more weeks and you'll be back." Lisa was anxious, worried, and probably wouldn't have slept well if it hadn't been for the wonderful pills. When she took them, she was much less worried about everything that was going on. Now she had to take 2 pills at once, but that was nothing. The main thing was that it helped. And only the grown-up motley Trishka, Lisa's favorite fluffy ball, jumping all day, pleased her weary heart, and William, who came as carefully as to the cottage to study. "You must try harder," said he, "Lisa. They had long ago switched to you for convenience, and you've been slacking off lately. You've become sluggish and relaxed. What's the matter?" "Yes, I'm very worried," Lisa complained to him. "Molly's having problems at the cottage. She's busy with her chores. Let's concentrate and work," William urged. "Do you want to get back on your feet by spring or what?" "I do. Of course I do." Lisa smiled. "I'll do my best." At last the repairs were finished, and she was taken back to the cottage. Lisa didn't notice any special changes, and there shouldn't have been any. The repairs were mainly in the basement, changing pipes, something else, John explained, but she didn't really care about the details. The main thing was that now her favorite veranda was at her disposal again. One night at dinner, Molly said, as if by accident, "Lisa, I'm going to have to go away for a while, because we have some important meetings. I've missed a lot already, you know." Sure. What are you talking about?" Lisa nodded. "Go, of course. Let John take you to the train or whatever it is you're going to do." "That's the point," said Molly. "Exactly how do you get there?" All of ours had already left, and I decided at the last minute. It was a shame to leave you alone in the city like that, you know. That's why I can't get the tickets I need. Airplane tickets are too expensive, and the train tickets are all sold out. Would you mind if John gave me a ride to New York in his car? And from there are good tickets. I checked. Of course, what are you talking about?" Lisa exclaimed. "Who would I be if I objected? You both care about me so much, of course you'll go. Then we'll say goodbye." Molly smiled. "We have to leave early tomorrow to make it on time. We'll leave at 4 o'clock in the morning, right, John?" "Sort of," agreed John. "And you, honey, sleep, don't worry. And don't forget to take your pills. They're good for you." The day when Lisa was left all alone, apart from the nurse and the kitten, was unusually nice and sunny. It was like an unplanned holiday in the middle of November. Lisa asked the nurse to take her out into the garden, sat in the sunshine, and breathed the fresh air. Then had breakfast at 11 o'clock as usual and went to the veranda to work while there was good light. And about an hour later, heard the noise of the automatic gate pulling away, surprised and alarmed. Had John and Molly really returned? Maybe they had forgotten something important, say, a passport, and would now be late for the train. But a completely unfamiliar car drove into the yard. Out of it came strangers, a woman and a man, and with them a small child. As if they were at home, they went to the front door of the house and opened it with a key. "Emily, Emily!" shouted Lisa to the nurse. "Emily, come here, for God's sake. Some strangers have come to our yard. Go ask them what they want." Emily left, and Lisa sat alone on the veranda again. listening to some lively dialogue between her and the strangers. She could hardly make out the words from the veranda, and here came the disturbed Emily, and with her the man who had come in the big unfamiliar car. "Good afternoon. Weren't you supposed to leave before today as agreed?" "What do you mean?" "I don't understand, Lisa. What was the agreement?" "With whom? With the salesman, of course." The man chuckled. "We bought the house." "You bought the house?" Lisa's eyes darkened. "No, it can't be. This is some kind of terrible mistake. This is my house. I live here. I've lived here for a long time. The cottage belonged to my late father, then to me. But you sold it to us, didn't you?" The man pulled some yellow paper out of his bag. "Look at this. Your husband signed the contract for you with a power of attorney." "Read it, read it. You gave him the power of attorney." "I did." Lisa echoed. But I didn't think, I didn't know." "Listen to me. I had absolutely no intention of selling the cottage." She shrieked, finally realizing what was happening. John must have been deceived, missiled. Wait, I'll call him now." She pulled out her phone and pressed the call button. There was no dial tone for a long time, and then the cell phone operator announced, in the voice of a mindless mechanical robot, that the subscriber was not answering or temporarily unavailable. Not picking up the phone, probably communications out of the way. "They left this morning, John and Molly. You know Molly has a plane out of New York today," she said to the man who was standing beside her, looking around, looking bossy. "Mason, what's going on here?" His wife came in and also looked at Lisa with surprise. "And who are you exactly?" "I am the owner of this cottage," Lisa told her rather uncertainly. "You were sold it by mistake." "By mistake?" The woman became agitated. "By mistake, you say?" "Yes, I'll call the police." "What kind of mistake?" "This isn't a joke, my dear. Here's the deed, here's the register. This is our house now, so I'm gonna have to ask you to leave." "Leave?" Lisa was indignant. "Where do you expect me to go?" "What do we care?" The woman smirked. "It's not our concern anymore." Shaking with terror, Lisa dialed Molly and John again and again, but could not reach them. Then, in utter despair, she called William. "Hello, William. It's Lisa. Yes. You know, I've had a terrible situation. Some strangers came and said I'd sold them the cottage, but I hadn't. John signed the contract by power of attorney. Someone must have cheated him. Probably the same people who came are kicking me out. Where am I going to go? Who will carry me to the cab, to the apartment? I don't even know who to turn to anymore. Could you come and take me to town? Please, I'll pay." William assured her that he would be there soon and asked her not to worry and to tell the strangers that he would come and take her away within the hour. Another conversation. Nodded the newfound hosts. "Wait, of course. What are we, some kind of fiends?" And they left the veranda and started to carry bags and boxes from the car. Lisa sat in her wheelchair, swallowing tears and convulsively clutching her pale, skinny hands, breaking, crunching her fingers. "Emily, please," she asked the nurse. "Would you be so kind as to fetch me my pills?" "Yes, I know it's not evening yet, but I'm terribly worried, Emily. Bring them, please." After taking the pills, Lisa was able to breathe more freely. The pressure in her chest was gone, and her eyes no longer swam in dark circles. Her head cleared, her eyes grew heavy, and she practically fell asleep sitting in the chair. It seemed like only 5 minutes had passed and William had already arrived. "What's going on here?" he asked worriedly. "Come on, put your arms around my neck. I'll carry you to the car. Don't forget Trishka." Lisa got worried. He mustn't stay here alone. Trish is loaded too. And Emily the nurse, who in the meantime had managed to collect some things Lisa needed and left for the city. At the apartment, they got another unpleasant surprise. Lisa's keys did not fit the lock, which was shining with a new keyhole on the door, familiar from childhood. "What is it?" "I don't understand anything." Lisa cried out in despair. "What is it?" "Why can't I enter my own apartment?" "Calm down." William pressed the bell button. "We'll take care of it. What do you want?" An elderly woman, a complete stranger to Lisa, opened the door on a chain. "Who are you here to see?" "I live here." Lisa shouted and tried to reach forward in her wheelchair and grab the door with her hand, but William intercepted her just in time and put his foot through the gap. "Listen," he said to the woman who opened the door. "This girl lives here. She's the landlady." "What kind of nonsense is that?" The woman was indignant. "My son bought this apartment a week ago. They are on vacation now and left me with my grandson. Go away before the child wakes up, or I'll call the police." Tears of despair and terror covered Lisa's eyes as William carried her downstairs to the car again. Setting her in the chair, he went back into the driveway to get the stroller, and Lisa tried calling her husband again. To no avail. "This is a nightmare, a dream." She complained to the returning William. "I have no idea what to do now. Shall we go to my place?" The doctor told her. "You'll stay with us for a few days. Get to know my family. We'll figure something out." He did not tell her so immediately that, most likely, her husband and best friend mercilessly threw her, selling both the house and the apartment, and themselves swept away to other, more distant lands. Of course, that's what happened. At the hour Lisa discovered that she no longer owned her entire place, they were already on a plane, and the plane was approaching the coast of the warm ocean. They didn't go as far as New York City. The car, which had also been sold, was handed over to the new owner near the airport, and they flew light with a substantial sum of money, transferred a couple days before to Molly and John from Lisa's account, to a hot tropical country. They expected that no one would find them there, and they had no intention of going back. They had already prepared residence permits for them and rented a nice villa on the coast in the name of a front man. "We'll sit for a while until everything settles down, and then we'll go to the islands. It's quieter there." Molly was talking John, happy that she finally got rid of her precious friend and everything that had surrounded her for years, annoying her and not giving her a normal life. Now she had settled down well, even perfectly, and was going to enjoy the well-being she deserved. And Lisa was inconsolable. In William's apartment, she sat in her stroller motionless, with her eyes red from tears, and stared, without seeing what she was looking at one point. A thought was beating insistently in her brain, but Lisa would not let it go. An inner voice told her that she didn't need to think about it, or it would hurt too much. By evening she was revitalized, remembering her pills, because the intrusive thought was becoming unbearably nagging, and was about to threaten to break through to some catastrophic conclusion. "William," Lisa called out in a weak voice. A boy of about 12 came into the room. "Do you want your daddy?" "I'll get him right away." He disappeared. 2 minutes later, the caller himself came up. "How are you, Lisa?" "I'm fine." "I need my pills in my bag. How long have you been taking those?" In the voice of William, who took out the package, you could hear notes of anxiety and even anger. "Who prescribed them to you?" "Some doctor Molly knows." Lisa shrugged. "She brought them over and said they were good for anxiety and worry. You know, I haven't been sleeping very well since the event, very badly, and I've been worrying. I was just panicking, and when I started taking them, everything went away. At first I drank one at night, and now again. So much has happened. I have to take 2 or 3 a day, but it's okay. Molly brought me a lot, a whole box. Molly brought you?" repeated William in a murderous tone, and shook his head back and forth, making a face as if he recognized something terrible. Without a word, he left the room. "And the pills?" Lisa cried out. "You forgot to give me the pills." William appeared in the doorway again. "Forget about them, you hear me? It's a drug, and you're already addicted to it." "What? What drug? What are you talking about?" "They're just sedatives." Lisa spoke loudly and excitedly, hurrying, making excuses again, but he didn't listen to her anymore. He started to call somewhere, to find out something, to talk to someone. "Give me my pills, give me my pills. Please, please, I'm in so much pain. It's so bad without them," shouted Lisa, driving up to the door, jerked the handle. It was locked. "You too. You too." She started banging her head against the door in hysterics. You're all conspiring to ruin me, and you're in on it with them. I realize now, I realize very well how much I hate you all. I hate you all." She screamed and shrieked with rage. "Do not think me so defenseless and stupid. No, no." In a wild impulse, she leaned her hands on the rail of the stroller, pulled herself up, and stood. Yes, she stood on her own, unaided, driven only by her raging, overwhelming fury. It was the thought that had kept her awake for so long, faded in the narcotic fog, unable to take shape. Now that the effects of the drug had worn off, Lisa realized everything, but with all her soul, with all her being, she insistently sought only one thing: the pills that would give her oblivion and peace. After standing for a few seconds and looking at her skinny, pale legs with blue veins, she suddenly shrieked like a wounded wild bird and collapsed on the floor near the stroller. "Lisa!" The door opened, colliding against the stroller, and William burst into the room. "Jesus, Lisa, are you up?" He shook her and laughed and cried himself. "You got up, you made it." Grabbing her in a senseless armful, he carried her to the bed, laid her there, covered her with a blanket, and shouted to his son, "Ethan, open the door, the doctor's coming." William himself remained seated beside Lisa, guarding against unfaithful, painful sleep. An hour later, she was back in the clinic, but not the one she had been in months ago. It was a specialized addiction clinic where she was to spend many difficult weeks. The luxurious villa was immersed in tropical greenery. The open balustrade overlooked the ocean bay, and everything breathed peace. By the pool with impeccably clear azure water lay, covering her face with a summer lace hat, a woman in a white swimsuit with an impeccable athletic figure, tanned to an even golden bronze color. Apparently, the peaceful splash of the waves coming from the coast, the fresh breeze giving coolness at this very hot lunch hour, and the slender cries of a bird lulled her to sleep. Noiselessly, treading in soft slippers, a Vietnamese maid came by, took away an empty martini bottle and 2 dirty cocktail glasses, and all was quiet again. But then some voices were heard from the side of the balustrade, then footsteps, and someone said protesting, "What right have you to trespass on private property like this?" Someone answered the voice in a foreign tongue. Another voice, a high, hurried voice, like the muttering of a bird, and the sharp footsteps came nearer, still nearer. "Molly," called someone very close to the sleeping woman, and again, "Molly, wake up. What is it?" Awkwardly removed her hat from Molly's face and looked at those who approached with cloudy, disgruntled, sleep-deprived eyes. "What's going on here? Who are all these people, John?" "Madam Molly?" A man speaking the same language as the woman came forward. You must come with us." "Why would I do that?" Molly was indignant, yawning. "Call the police, John." "Who let them in here? Those crazy assholes?" "Oh, yes, let me introduce myself." The English-speaking man took off his small-holed summer hat. "Interpol Central Bureau. Officer Braun. These are our witnesses." He nodded toward the crowded, wary Vietnamese and turned to John. "All this applies to you too, Mr. John." "No, no, no," Molly shouted, jumping up from the chaise lounge. "You have no right. This is some kind of wild mistake. We're decent people. What are we accused of?" "You are right," nodded the officer. "Quite right. I got a little distracted looking at your beautiful villa, and I completely forgot to list the acts of which you are accused." So he began to curl the fingers on his hand. "Attempted murder, committed by an organized group of persons, by prior conspiracy with particular cruelty, fraud, deliberate inducement of a person to abuse drugs, and a little thing, forgery of documents." "I think we're good." He smiled. "So please get dressed and follow me, voluntarily and without any tricks. The villa is cordoned off, you understand." He spread his hands. "And any resistance to the lawful demands of the law enforcement agencies that my humble person here represents is completely futile." Molly and John looked at each other poisonously. Molly pulled herself together and nodded her head slightly. "All right, give us a few minutes." "Of course." The officer waved his hand broadly. "My men will escort you to the check room or wherever you want to go." On the other side of Molly, in a city far away from these magical coasts, about 2 months after the last events described above, 3 people of tall, athletic build, a man with brown eyes, another with an attentive, serious face, and in a strict suit with a briefcase, and a frail, slender young woman approached the gates of the prison, showed their passports at the checkpoint. The man in the suit said something to the officer on duty, and they were let through the gate. "How are you?" asked the brown-eyed man. "Are you sure you're ready?" "Yeah," she nodded. "I'm fine. I'm fine." Passing through a maze of corridors, some posts and barred doors, they found themselves in a small office, where behind a simple shabby desk sat a man in a gray suit, with such cold and hard eyes that anyone would feel uncomfortable when looking at him. The man who came with the diplomat, however, was not confused. "Good afternoon, Christopher. We're all here as agreed." "Good." The man in the gray suit, almost without looking at them, handed over the papers. "Show the witnesses where to sign." When the formalities were over, 2 more people were brought into the office, a woman and a man in handcuffs, both short-shaven, eyes lost. The escort who had brought them in saluted and stood at the doorway. "You have 3 minutes to communicate freely." Through the man in gray, towards everyone gathered. "Then we'll begin the confrontation." A man with warm brown eyes shook the hand of a fragile blonde woman, and she swallowed convulsively, finally daring to raise her eyes to those who were brought in handcuffs. "John, Molly," her voice trembled. "Why are you doing this to me?" Molly laughed deliberately, rudely, and insolently. "Did you think, my dear, that I would be your free servant all my life? That everything would always be handed to you on a platter, and the whole world would love you forever, like Daddy and Mommy? Ah, I hate you and people like you." She spat vigorously in the direction of the fragile woman standing with widened eyes of horror, but got on the edge of the table of a gray, steel-eyed man. He shifted his heavy gaze to her, and she fell silent, and her angry rage faded. "So I see that we can begin the interrogation." The man in the gray suit stated, took out a paper napkin, squeamishly wiped away the spit, and threw it in the trash. Then he opened a thick cardboard folder on his desk and turned to those who had come in. If you would be so kind as to state your last names, first names, middle names." 3.5 weeks after this first meeting in the pre-trial detention center, Molly, accused of all the crimes mentioned by the Interpol officer, hanged herself in her cell, using her cape and tights for this purpose. Her accomplice, Lisa's ex-husband, completely withdrew into himself and obediently bore everything that fate had deservedly sentenced him to. At the trial, he repented of everything, admitted his guilt, tearfully asked Lisa for forgiveness, swore that he realized everything, and on all made a disgusting impression, a helpless and broken man. He was given the maximum as requested by the prosecutor, and a few years later he died quietly in some penal colony of tuberculosis, complicated by pneumonia. Lisa became very close to William and his son, as well as their elderly grandmother. The family had lost their mother a couple of years earlier, and Lisa, who long after the experience was over could not trust anyone, did not immediately reciprocate William's advances. "You must be a very good man," she said to him sadly. "That is, you seem good to me, but I am not able now to realize who is who and trust you. I'm not worthy of you. I'm not even worthy of myself. Yeah, don't mind me. I'm just an idiot who can't see what's going on under her nose, and I'm a complete stranger to people." "That's okay." He comforted her. "You're the most courageous and resilient person I know." "Yes, I am." She grinned. "Come on, it was all your own idea." It took 3 whole years to rehabilitate Lisa, and all that time William was there, always ready to help. And one late summer evening, sitting on the veranda of her returned cottage and pensively looking at the lantern on which the silly, burning from their relentless and impossible striving moths were beating, she quietly said, sitting next to William, "You know I'll never marry again, and I'll never have children. You know that, don't you?" Lisa grinned bitterly. "So what?" he asked, smiling, and took her hand gently. "I don't need a stamp in my passport, and I have a son too. Then why do you need me?" Lisa raised her suffering, sad eyes to him, but suddenly he saw something new in them. "Why?" she repeated insistently. "To love you." He answered gently, "Just to love, that's all." "Is that enough?" Her lips trembled and tears came into her eyes. "It is enough for me." He slowly moved closer to her, so as not to frighten her or scare her away. "I love you, Lisa. I just love you. That's enough for me. Even if I can't love you the same way. We won't measure the quantity of our love." He finally put his arms around her and pulled her close to him. "I'm sure it's enough for us as a whole." "William," Lisa cried, "I don't deserve this. That's it. Stop worrying. I'm not going anywhere else, do you hear me?" He told her firmly, "You won't send me away again." Lisa, true to her word, never married him, both of them quite happy with it. To this day, the two live together in an old academic summer house. Lisa paints after the trauma of the unanimous assessment of critics. In her paintings appeared something new, attractive. Depth, mystery, unspoken pain. They are eagerly bought by wealthy people and connoisseurs of contemporary art, and several times a year, Lisa has solo exhibitions in various cities around the world. William continues to work with her broken patients, trying to find his approach to each one. And he tells everyone an incredible, almost impossible story of healing of one small and fragile, but so strong and pure in spirit woman that before her fate itself retreated, first preparing for her a completely different, very tragic and cruel ending.